This video tutorial will use Adobe Fresco to explore digital drawing and colouring techniques to help students develop their primary source drawings. It will also explain how this can help students create evidence that addresses the assessment objectives, particularly AO1 and AO2. To start, open the app, select the document size that you want to work with, go to the image icon and place in your drawing. Using the Properties panel, lower the opacity of the drawing and then add a new layer on. This will be the layer that you draw onto. Over on the left hand side are all the brushes. I recommend working with the vector brushes to start off with for your line work, simply because the vector brushes can be used in conjunction with the app's quick selection tool. You can see here how I'm extending my lines because the one thing that you do need to do when you're working digitally, if you want to add colour, is make sure you create whole shapes. So extending the lines like this using a vector brush, and then at the top of the screen you can see like a white circle. This is its quick selection tool. You can double click on that and it turns the brush into an eraser, and you can get rid of these extended lines, making whole shapes. I strongly recommend duplicating your line work layer before you start adding colour. This will help students document their process as they go. Once you've finished your line work, now add colour. I recommend one colour per layer. So using the add layer icon, it's over on the right hand side, it's the square with the plus. Add a layer, and using the paint bucket tool and the colour wheel tool, select your colour scheme. The wonderful thing about working digitally, here you can see I've made a mistake and I've not joined up all my lines, so I've not got whole shapes, is the undo function. So I've had to go back onto my line work layer, join up some of those shapes so I can begin colouring in more successfully. That this undo function, especially under AO2, the creative making, encouraging students to experiment, working digitally, because they can undo so easily and quickly, it really gives them the courage to experiment more broadly, more readily. It's a very useful tool. So again, I've added a new layer. I'm using the paint bucket tool with the colour wheel tool to create my colour scheme, and I just tap once with the stylus to fill that shape with the colour. If students could use the screen record function on the iPad, this will come in useful for their documentation and evaluative process under both AO1 and AO2, or they could simply use the screen grab function of the iPad and create screenshots of their work as they develop. What you're looking at now is the part of the illustration where we start to add tone and texture. Because we've got all our colours on separate layers, working with clipping masks is so easy to add tone and texture. So here you can see I've added a new layer, but we've got the bent arrow tool, which means that that layer is clipped into the laces. So whatever I do will only affect the laces. I'm using either the pixel brushes this time or the live paint brushes to work with tone and texture, or you can experiment with bringing in photographs or rubbings to add tone and texture. Here's a photograph that I'm using right now. I'm using the transform tool to resize it and rotate it. I've dragged it down the layer stack with my finger, and then I've used the clipping mask tool on the right hand side, the coloured in square with the bent arrow, to clip it to the orange shape layer. Using the properties panel, I chose a blending mode to alter the colour of that photograph to make it work better with my colour scheme. I'm now going in one layer at a time, adding clipping mask to each colour layer, adding texture and tone. The live paint brushes are particularly good for this and would encourage experimentation under AO2 and develop an idea under AO1. The live paints, as you can see, they work better once you start adding in a second colour. Just like the label, they interact with one another, they're live. So adding in a second or a third colour, which of course you must if you want to explore tone, these brushes really do come into their own because they start to intermingle and mix and bleed and create secondary and tertiary colours. So students can really explore tone and texture quite effectively digitally. So again, I've added a clipping mask layer, but this time to my dark green colour, because I'm going to start working on adding a bit of depth to illustrate the interior of the trainer. And I'm using the live paintbrush tool again, but this time the oil pastel version. And I'm starting to build up one layer of oil paint and then go back in with another oil paint brush with a darker tone at a larger brush size to start to blend and create the idea of the interior of the trainer. Adding new layers this way, exploring clipping masks this way. Students can experiment with tone, texture, colour, all addressing AO2 and AO1, the development of an idea. Here you can see me turning off layers and recording or screenshotting what I've made. It's a really good way, it's a really good tool to help students document what they've made. So here I've hidden several layers. I just click on the layer and hide that layer and then record that version of this illustration for the sketchbook. And you can go as far as changing the colour of your line work, again using the clipping mask function. I've added another layer on above my line work to change the colour to kind of a darkish blue colour to work better with the colour scheme in the end. So everything is infinitely editable. Everything within Fresco opens up the world of experimentation for your students and really lets you explore AO1 and AO2 imaginatively and creatively. Once they've finished these drawings, they can explore pattern making, surface pattern with them. They can use it as an asset for a design project. It's entirely up to them, really.